They're very hard to bring off, these romantic comedies. I think you could compare it in the sense of the chemistry being perfect with Casablanca. It's one of those things which lots of people had written films in the genre of Casablanca, but the many authors of Casablanca just hit the nail on the head with that one. Casting was perfect, everything about it worked. Same thing with Forwardings and the Funeral. It just, it all clicked in a way that is impossible to predict.
And you were the funeral.
I was the funeral, which was a rather striking and daring
We could therefore
thing.
say you were in the title role.
I am indeed in the title role.
And Amadeus was a huge fame, really, wasn't it? I mean, it was so global on film, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and remains, because of the world in which we now live, DVD has transformed the way people know films. Because in the old days, if you wanted to see your favourite film, you'd have to wait patiently until it came round again. Then television started reviving films. But with DVD, you can watch your favourite film whenever you want to see it. So I keep running into people who have seen Four Weddings and a Funeral 50 times.
Oh, 50 times. Not
50
just
times.
seen it. As if it's
just seen it, but also seen it 50 times. And you know, that means to say that they know it a lot better than I do. I've seen it once, you know.
One of the other things for which you're famous was your declaration about homosexuality, of course. Are you looking back, you're proud and glad you did that?
Very, very much so. And of course, Four Weddings and a Funeral was part of all of that.
Yeah.
Because that character broke a whole lot of stereotypes about being gay. And at the time, Four Weddings and a Funeral, remember, was made at the height of the AIDS, kind of the first wave of AIDS.
Horror of it.
A horror of it, and it was a wonderful thing to have a gay character who died of something other than AIDS. What he died of was Scottish dancing. And I've always thought of the film as a government health warning against the perils of Scottish dancing.
That's right. So you gave up Scottish dancing.
I gave up Scottish dancing
as a result of that,
yes.
of that particular role. So that in the general field, across, do you get the same satisfaction from doing all the various things, the directing, or do they give you a different fulfilment or pleasure?
Yes, they're all very different. I mean, I write a lot. I've
yes,
written
you do.
17 books now, and that, of course, is a solitary pleasure. The book is only as good as you can make it. Nobody else has anything to do with it. I mean, it's nice to have the input of an editor, but if you're directing a play, then you're dependent on the whole group of people that you've assembled. So it's critical that you get the right people. Being a director, especially directing a movie, is an area of absolute responsibility, and I've only directed one film, which was The Ballad of the Sad Café, which was distinguished by having Rod Steiger and Vanessa Redgrave in the cast, and it was not altogether a success, and in the end I have to take the responsibility for that. I have to say, well, you know, I was in charge and I didn't quite get it right. Very often in the theatre, when you're acting in a play, things do go wrong and it's not your fault at all.
No. So what is the most essential quality that an actor needs?
Shamelessness, I suppose, in a sense, but I mean that in quite a deep sense, that you have to be prepared to show a lot about what goes on inside you, and you have to want to communicate it. You have to need, actually, to communicate it. It's not enough to want to. You've really got to need to share with people what you've understood about the human situation. That's a sort of compelling feeling inside me, as I now, having done just Toby Belch, I really want to tell people what I found out about Toby Belch and what in working on Toby Belch I found out about myself. You know.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations on this latest triumph, and here's to the next time.
Indeed.
Our thanks to Simon Callow, that man of many talents, for joining us, and that's it for this programme, unfortunately. My thanks to all of our guests, of course. Do join us again for the next Frost Over the World, but until then, goodbye for now.
Business Latest is brought to you by Capco in just about everything. Business Latest is brought to you by Capco in just about everything.
On the next Rizkan show, end of an era. As the political landscape of the Arab world changes with popular uprising, what happens to US influence in the region? Rizkan at this time on Al Jazeera.
Leaders are remembered, be they loved or feared. Alone they are inscribed on the pages of history. But what of the men and women whose hands build their monuments and whose blood stains their battlefields? The people who, against all odds, wield the power to reshape history. People in power at this time on Al Jazeera.
As protests, violence, and the call for political reform spreads across the Arab world, Al Jazeera's in-depth coverage of events on the ground brings you the news as it breaks. Ongoing coverage of the Libya uprising on Al Jazeera.
This is Al Jazeera.
Hello, welcome to the News Hour. I'm Shudi Ghosh from Al Jazeera News Centres here in Doha and live from Libya, Egypt and Yemen. These are the main stories. Defiance and diplomacy. Gaddafi sends a top envoy to Egypt but says Libyans will take up arms and fight if the West imposes a no-fly zone. His forces have launched a new airstrike on the oil city of Ras Lanuf and they're closing in on the western town of AlJazeera. At least one protester dies in Sana'a after police move in on crowds outside the university. And an attack on a funeral procession in Pakistan kills at least 37 people. Plus, Chechny's feared president leads his team in a friendly against Brazil's top players. Three of the Libyan leaders' private planes have left Tripoli heading for Cairo. At least one of them has landed, carrying on board a high-ranking official for talks with Ammar Moussa, the head of the Arab League. Muammar Gaddafi himself remains as defiant as ever, saying the Libyan people will take up arms if Western powers do take action. His forces are using tanks, rockets and warplanes to stop the rebels. Gaddafi's tanks are reported to have surrounded the rebel-held Zawiya, that's close to the capital of Tripoli.